Hello campers, this is the Suburban Camper and this is a follow-up to my Chevrolet Suburban Common Problems videos. In the latest video on that topic, I said I was planning on getting my fuel pump replaced to address an idle and engine stalling issue with my 2000 Chevrolet Suburban 1500 LT with the 5.3 liter engine. A few days before this repair was to be completed, another issue popped up which added a bit of a wrinkle to my decision to replace the fuel pump. So, in this video I will walk you through the issues, diagnosis, decision process, and the results. If you are having any idle issues with your Suburban, I think you will find this video useful. My Suburban has 197,000 miles. I am the second owner and I believe the fuel pump has never been replaced. I was experiencing an occasional issue of my engine struggling to maintain a steady idle. It would drop down to 100 or 200 RPM and then pop up to 600 or 700 RPM, and sometimes the engine would stall. Please note I did not capture the issue as it happened, so this portion of the video is a recreation. I was always able to restart it by giving it plenty of throttle, and then, after revving the engine, it would return to a steady idle and run and drive normally. Often the issue presented itself right after or shortly after I filled the gas tank. There were never any fault codes, and my research and troubleshooting led me to conclude the issue was caused by either a dirty throttle body or a failing fuel pump. So I did the easy job first and cleaned the throttle body, but the issue persisted, so I turned my focus on the fuel pump. The fuel pump replacement job requires the fuel tank to be removed. My garage does not have the overhead space required to lift the Suburban high enough to drop the fuel tank, so I would need to have the work done for me. While I was not 100% sure the cause of my issue was the fuel pump, I regularly traveled to remote places where being stranded by a failed fuel pump would present some major challenges to overcome. This, plus the fact my Suburban likely has the original fuel pump and is therefore due for replacement based on both time and miles, led to my decision to replace it. Even if my diagnosis is wrong and the fuel pump is not the cause of the issue, the replacement cost is well worth the peace of mind it will provide me in my future travels. So I scheduled the fuel pump replacement for the following week. But before I dropped it off, my service engine soon light came on, so I scanned for codes and got P0122, indicating throttle position sensor low output voltage. While researching and diagnosing the throttle position sensor fault code, I realized my base idle was not normal, and I'd also been experiencing abnormal shift points. This is the first Suburban I have owned, and my base idle was about 650 to 750 RPM, which seemed fine to me, but through this process I learned it should be 500 RPM. When you first start the engine, 650 to 750 is normal, but once the engine is warmed up a bit or you start driving, then the idle should always be 500 RPM. I also experienced a very high idle in hot weather with the AC running. Occasionally it would idle over 1000 RPM as if it was trying to cool an engine that was getting too hot, even though the engine temperature was well in the normal range. Regarding abnormal shift points, after a high throttle downshift, it would take a long time to shift back to a higher gear, even when I backed way off the throttle. This mostly happened when climbing up a pass, so I figured this was just a normal shift point when climbing. Now, I know high idle and abnormal shift points are both symptoms of a faulty throttle position sensor, but so is a fluctuating idle and engine stalling. So this new issue led me to doubt my failing fuel pump diagnosis. The throttle position sensor is an inexpensive part and easy to replace, so I went ahead and ordered a new one. I still felt replacing the fuel pump was a smart thing to do, so I moved forward with that repair, but I held off on replacing the sensor as I wanted to see if I would get the fault code again after the fuel pump was replaced. When I picked up my Suburban, I immediately noticed a difference with the new fuel pump. My engine starts stronger, the throttle is more responsive, and I soon realized just how much power I was missing out on. There is no doubt in my mind the fuel pump was starting to fail and it was the right decision to replace it. After driving the Suburban for a while, sure enough, the service engine soon light came on and it indicated the same code, so I proceeded with replacing the throttle position sensor. The next day, I departed for a camping trip with my mom, and for the entire 1,200 plus miles, my idle was always 500 RPM, even when we were traveling in 100 plus degree heat with the AC running. Also, my shift points were spot on, even when climbing, and the service engine soon light never illuminated. Most importantly, the fluctuating idle and engine stalling issue never presented itself. So, what fixed the fluctuating idle and engine stalling issue? Was it the new fuel pump, or the throttle position sensor, or both? I believe even though those two components both need to be working properly to achieve a proper engine idle, the issues were separate, and the new fuel pump fixed the fluctuating idle and engine stalling issue, and the new throttle position sensor fixed the high idle and improper shift point issues. Either way, my Suburban is running great, and I have peace of mind that a bad fuel pump or throttle position sensor is not going to leave me stranded. So, if you encounter an idle issue with your 9th generation Suburban and your throttle body is clean, then I recommend throwing a part at the problem, and that part is the throttle position sensor, and if that does not fix the problem, then move on to the fuel pump. If you learned something from this video, please subscribe, and if you want to learn more about the part and repair process for the throttle position sensor, please visit the Common Repairs page at suburbancamping.com. Thank you very much.